Welcome back once again, friends. We have been looking at pixel art. Now we are just going to extend this whole idea to an arbitrary pattern. For example, this Mario, where we have used the same exact kind of code to generate an image which looks quite attractive. In fact, Mario is just an example. You can apply this idea to almost any pixel art to make a pattern of your liking, and it will be great programming exercise as well as the outcome will be something that you will really enjoy. Now, it turns out that in fact, all the tools that are required to make this are already present with us. Now it's just a matter of applying them and perhaps making them a little bit more efficient. So let's just think about it. How do we draw a picture like this? Remember, this entire grid has been drawn row by row, and we have already seen that in a given row, we can use if, elif, else to get, for example, different colors, right? So that's the whole basis of this method that I'm going to talk about. In fact, I'm going to give you two types of methods. One is directly using this if, elif, else, and the other one, which I think is a little bit more efficient, little bit more elegant, but I'm going to use the concept of lists for this. Now, building a code like this takes a lot of time, so I'm not going to do this like in the entire, let's say in the entirety in this video. I will instead give you some ideas on how you can implement it in your projects, and I'll also give you a sample project which you can refer to a little bit later. So let's get started. Let's look at method number one. Now, what I have done is that in my replet, I've cleaned up my ripple once again, and I am just creating this kind of a grid over here, right? So a grid where I've removed all the other, art that I was creating. I'm just using these two for loops as we have seen before to create a green grid of 20 cells wide and 20 cells down, right? Now let's look at the Mario picture, right? So I can just pull out my cover sheet from here. Let's look at the Mario picture. The very first row is all white. The second row is also all white, right? So how can I do that? Yeah, I can go back to my code and now I can start putting this if else elif else type of statement. So I can just put here, notice I want to do this in the loop where I, uh, you know, so I have to be careful here. I want to indent this code and I want to write, for example, okay, so I made a mistake here. It should be range and calls and then this, the colon here, and I indent this. Now I can write a code where I say if, for example, kk equals to 0, I don't need this bracket, or kk is equal to 1, right? So I go and say or kk, sorry, kk 1. Now if this situation happens, basically it's either row number 0 or row number 1, which is the top row or the second row. I want, so I can go and say I want all the rectangles here to be drawn as white color. So I can use this command Control C and I can just go and indent this again with respect to this if. So if I put a tab here, for example, I'm going to say draw rectangle, but this time I'm going to say all white. Uh, let's say I'm just going to say else, which means for everything else, I go and for now I just go and draw a green rectangle. Now be a little bit careful with the indentation because uh, we have to be really careful, right? Otherwise the meaning will change. So here it's okay because notice my if else is sort of inside the inner loop, and my if has this portion, else has this portion. This particular x val equals x plus 15 should not become part of the if else, otherwise there'll be problem as we've seen before, and hence I bring it back to the, okay, so I made a mistake again. I bring this back to the original indentation, which is aligned with the which this if else, because it's part of this inner repeat loop or the for loop, right? And then this is outside that loop, so that creates the next row, right? So if I run this now, for example, I'm going to get a situation where the first two rows are indeed white. Now I can continue this. Look at the third row, right? In the third row, I've got, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 pixels which are white. Then I've got 5 red, and then remaining are again all white, right? So what I can do is that I can, come back to my code, and here I say, let's say I add an elif statement, and I say elif, say kk equals to 2, because we are talking of row number 3. So kk is equal to 2. Here I put an elif kk equals to 2, and now what I can do is that in this row. So in this row, what happens is that I can now put another if else condition, because you remember I can treat this row as a single unit. And now I can say if say jj is less than 8, or jj is greater than, I guess, 13. Now how am I computing this number? Let me just verify this is correct. So I'm going to count for my jj 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which means less than 7, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and greater than 11. So less than 7 and greater than 11, so I have to be careful. Less than 7 or greater than 11. If that happens, I want my, so again, I have to be careful here. I have to put the colon on this. Now, if that is the case, I'm going to draw a rectangle of color white, because that's the outer boundary. Else, I'm going to draw, else I need, okay, so yeah, else, again, you have to be really careful about the indentations here because it's going to get messed up otherwise, right? So if I do this, else I'm going to draw a red color here, right? Now, remember, this again I have to be careful. Maybe you can give some small gaps. So this is row number 1, row number 2. uh, this is, sorry, row number 0, row number 1, row number 2, which is actually row number 3, because kk, remember, is going from 0 onwards. So 0, 1, 2. Now we're talking row number 3. In row number 3, I apply this logic if else, and remaining will still remain green, right? So I can go and see this. Notice what happens now is that the first two rows are white. The third row, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pixels as white, 5, reds, and then remaining are again white, right? So again, you know, such a thing can be continued. Let's look at another row. For example, let's say I look at the next row. It's going to be very similar, except that there are 3 extra reds here and 1 extra red over here, right? So I'm just going to take, you know, extend this elif statement, and I'm going to say, okay, look, if, so over here again, I have to be careful. I have to bring to the same level as elif, uh, say kk equals to 3, which means we're talking of the next row. And then what happens is basically a code like this. Let's see. So here, right? Now what's going on is that, remember, I had to take an extra white here, so extra red here, which means I must make this 6, and I must make this 14, because there were 3 extra, reds on the right side. Let's just see if this works. Now, obviously, this is a little bit cumbersome, but quite logical, because basically what we are doing is that we are just creating this thing row by row, right? And that's perfectly valid. You can imagine that if you continued with this, you will be able to, in fact, get this thing. It's probably not interesting, right? Now, this process will work because we have already seen that if elif else can be used for one row to get different colors, and that's exactly what we are doing. But I think there's a little bit more elegant method, little bit more efficient method of doing this. And I'm not going to write that code here. Instead, I'm going to just go to the class project, which is, so I'll come in here. Um, so if we go to the class website and click on this project, this is where you will go. So that's the second approach. Now in this approach, it's actually quite similar. It's quite similar, really. It's just that I'm using a slightly more, let's say, easier to read code. So what I'm doing is that I'm creating a list of colors. Now lists we have not formally read, but it's really like we discussed in the past in Scratch. It's a big brother of variables. So a lot of variables connected to each other through, let's say, some indices, right? And the way we describe a list in Python is actually very, very simple. We just say, for example, some sequence of numbers, comma separated, and put them in square brackets. So we have created a color list. And what I've really done is that for every, row, I have defined this color list. Now, uh, in this particular implementation, I am in fact coding my colors as numbers. So remember, the first row was all white, right? So I'm just calling it a color list. I'm creating a color list where everything is all one. Because what happens is that when I come to the actual rendering of the code, I just, I notice this is the inner loop where I'm going to draw that row. So I look at that row, and in the color list, basically color list is telling me what is the color of each pixel. If the pixel color list happens to be 1, then I draw a white rectangle. So in effect, I'll get a white rectangle for every pixel on row number 1 and row number 2. Next, when it comes to row number 3, remember there were like, I think, 6 whites. Then there were seven or eight reds, right? And then remaining whites, right? And that's how we had the picture here. So previously we had done it. So six whites, say five reds, and remaining whites, right? So here I've called my color list as all ones in the beginning because they are all white. Then a bunch of twos, exactly as many as I want to from that pixel image, and then all ones again, right? And here the number two refers to color red. So notice here in my color rendering, I say else if color list JJ, which I'm indexing the list is like item JJ of that list is two, then I use red, right? And so on and so forth. So then brown. So let's look at one more row. For example, let's say we take you know uh, so we take, let's say, row somewhere in the middle, right? So it's like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if you look at the 10th row, which means KK equals to 10, we've got five whites, we've got three reds, one blue, two reds, one blue, three reds, and so on and so forth, right? So if I come in here, if I come into this code in row number 10, I've got five whites, three reds, one blue. So six must be blue. If I look at my code, I've just defined it this way. So six is blue because, notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is something. Six is blue. Two whites again. No, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong row. So I look at row number 10, for example, KK equals to 10. Uh, okay, so KK equals to 10. So one blue, two reds, one blue again, three reds, and five whites. Right. So it's basically describing the entire picture in colors, and then the rendering becomes a little bit cleaner. So either case, by using if-elif-else, we can create this that we have done, that go row by row and define every row as you want to draw. Right now, it's a little bit laborious, but like I said, the end result generally justifies the entire the entire effort that goes into it, right? So I hope this methods became clear to you. You can use either method, the if else method, if that's easier. uh, if you want to explore a little bit on lists, then you can use this method of color list because this results in a little bit cleaner implementation, but both of them will give you the outcome that you're looking for. Do let me know if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer those. But I hope you found this entire journey of doing a pixel art quite interesting. Remember, we have covered a long, long way. We started by just drawing a single line. We went on to draw a square. We went on to fill it. Then we went on to draw a row of squares. We realized that we need to learn about the range function, the for loop. We created one row. We created a grid by using two for loops. Then we started looking at patterns within the grid. In between, we speeded up the drawing, and now here we are drawing arbitrary patterns. So a long, long journey, but a great one in terms of learning about Python, in terms of enjoying, the act of programming, and in terms of seeing a creative outcome at the end of the journey. Right? I hope you like this. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.